This is Glambition Radio, episode number 262, Rediscovering Your Own Body's Intuition with Dr. Kelly Brogan.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Glambition Radio.
Glambition Radio.
Glambition Radio.
Glambition Radio.
Glambition Radio.
Glambition Radio.
Welcome to Glambition Radio. I am your host, Allie Brown. I'm an entrepreneur, mentor, investor, and founder of The Trust, the modern premier network for 7- and 8-figure women leaders. I love thinking big, doing different, and exploring ideas that disrupt the status quo, especially when it comes to women, because we are creating the new models for leadership, business success, making money, and changing the world. And hey, we're doing it with style. So let's go. I want to share that when I finally was able to talk with our guest today, before the interview, it was the first time I've ever spoken to her in person. The first thing I said is, I just want you to know, as graceful and beautiful and feminine as you are, you have balls so big that you may need a wheelbarrow to carry them around. Your courage is just off the charts. This woman has so much conviction about what she knows is true. And if anything, as with any of my guests, as I bring you a great variety, take away the conviction that this woman has. That's what you need to have about your beliefs. And at the same time, listen to other people, be like, oh, that's interesting. Or, I may agree with 7 out of 8 of those things. And that other thing, I don't think I agree with. And let's move on. Okay. But people don't know how to think these days or hear different opinions on things. And that's why I was so enchanted with this woman. When I heard her interviewed on Joe Rogan a few years ago, that's when I really became aware of her. Because when you discover your personal truth, but it defies decades of what you were schooled to believe, and what everyone else around you believes, how do you even begin the transition to truly honor it? It's going to be a fantastic conversation today. Kelly Brogan, MD, is a holistic psychiatrist. She's author of the New York Times bestselling books, A Mind of Your Own and Own Yourself. She's creator of the Vital Mind Reset and Vital Life Project. And we're going to go deep today. It's going to be a really, really good one. All the awakening moments on her journey, as well as a few things that I want to throw in that, have been a bit of gems for me over the years as well, and how I really woke up to my body's own intuition as far as knowing what is right for my body and my health. And that's what this is all about. A few quick notes first. I want to let you know that Iconic, my event happening on November 3rd and 4th here in Phoenix, is more than halfway sold out. Would you like to join us? It's an incredible group of women. I'm going to tell you right now, we were going through the applications. The average revenues in the room at this point are $2.3 million. You don't have to be in the 7 figures to join us, but there are some little prereqs. We want to make sure this ain't your first rodeo. You want to learn more. Are you ready to think different? Are you ready to be around women who really play bigger, think differently, and are so incredibly generous with each other, and these great conversations, and we're going to have a great time? And aren't you missing that? Being together in person. IconicWithAllieBrown.com. And a big thank you to these 2 women who left great reviews for us. My team pulled these. First is Bronwyn GMR from South Africa, wrote excellent guests, tons of information, phenomenal show for anyone wanting to get into entrepreneurship or leaders who are looking to rethink some strategies, fun and insightful with inspirational takeaways in every episode. And then Fibro Girl 96 from the US, absolutely amazing podcast. It's a mix of great stories, tips, inspiration, and sharing wisdom from what the guests have learned in their professional and personal lives. My favorite one, hands down, was her podcast with Dana Perino. That was one of my favorites too. Was she not amazing? I hope to be meeting her in person this fall, hopefully. Thank you so much for taking the time to leave us a review. It helps other women who are looking for something different find the show. We truly appreciate it. Now, I can't wait to get to this interview. Please get yourself in a good place, open your mind, and get ready for a powerful conversation with Dr. Kelly Brogan. Dr. Brogan, can you tell me where you are right now?
I am physically in rainy Miami, and I am spiritually in yet another turn of the spiral that is forever humbling me into awareness around the many aspects of myself I would not have otherwise been aware of. So I'm definitely in it, as I know so many people are at this moment in time.
Yeah, this week especially, it seems pretty intense.
Yeah. Although I could say that about like
every week. The last 52.
I not use that word as a summary of how things are going. Intense.
I always have mixed feelings when people say, isn't it an incredible time to be alive? And we all wanted to be here. I'm like, oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Man, you've had a year. You've had a year. I don't even know where to start, but I think maybe the best place is the beginning, is, why you chose to become an MD, and then, the journey from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I have the perspective that we incarnated to experience contrast and to experience polarities. And I am in, a very unique position, having occupied and continuing, I guess, to occupy very dramatic personifications of these polarities, specifically around embodiment. And I know that someday, somehow, I'm going to be an integrated being who can hold all of my various parts with loving kindness and self-compassion. However, I'm still in this place where I feel so identified now with the pole that I'm occupying as somebody who is a fierce defender, believer, and advocate for, natural health and medicine and bodily sovereignty and radical healing. But it's a very important piece of context that, I spent the first half of my life in a consciousness that would be described as the Matrix, and I was a card-carrying pill pusher, so much so that I specialized as a psychiatrist in, medicating pregnant and breastfeeding women. So, the person that I was then, who derided natural medicine and, was very much indoctrinated in the ways of the allopathic cult, the person I was then is the same person that I am now. And I thought that I was helping women and doing good and mitigating their struggle and suffering then in the same ways that, with the same intentionality, at least, that I might be offering that now. So, I think the graduated phase from where I have come, which is to, fight with what is and to, struggle around struggling and to avoid and resist, all that feels bad. That's kind of hell, whether you're doing it through homeopathics and essential oils or plant medicine, or whether you're doing it through pharmaceuticals and surgery. So, where I've come in the past couple of years since moving down to Miami and escaping the open jail cell that is New York City, has been to a place of really coming into ever integrating embodiment around, what it is to move actually towards pleasure, towards joy, and towards a kind of, simplicity of living that as a child I was enculturated to reject because it's not lucrative, it's not productive, and there's maybe nothing to show for it, if that means that I am just going to dance around my yard or play with my chickens or, otherwise, tend to my garden. Although I have gravitated towards like domestic arts, like sewing and gardening, because there is something to show for it. And I feel very proud often, more so than even the books that I've written.
Those may be the skills we'll need more than ever.
I know, right?
Where the world goes.
Never, valued them or wasn't encouraged to value them then. So definitely in that process of coming into understanding that I can make contact with the desire that lies underneath so many of the difficult feelings, whether it's grief or shame or sadness or rage or disgust, that I still don't want to feel. I still don't want to feel those feelings. And so I can, find ways to not feel them, and or I can make contact with what it is deep inside them, like this innocent, pure, tender little flicker of desire for something that I've probably wanted my whole life, that now I have contact with the power required to create. And so that's kind of more the sovereign path I'm interested in integrating around, and that the current, agenda and experiences over the past year and a half have been integral to, right? So I certainly can't sit here and say like, oh God, life is so horrible. I can't believe what they're doing to us, the controllers, this and that. I certainly do that often. And I can hold it in approval because I can see that every aspect of what is being reflected to me on the outside is kind of being worked out on the inside as well.
Yeah. Was this a slow evolution to the Kelly Brogan we see today, or was there a defining moment?
Yeah, I don't do slow. Actually, I just hired an erotic coach, right? Because I want to work on, really coming into an experience of my body as a source of pleasure outside of even, sexuality and the bedroom and everything else. And just threading that kind of energy throughout my lifescape, right? And our second appointment, she was like, okay, what you just did in 1 week is what takes my clients like 3 months to do. So, and I said, this is the problem in my life is I've been praised and rewarded and validated for this kind of, it's like self-flagellating impatience to get things done quickly. But it really comes from a place of, needing to constantly feel that I can see evidence that I'm better, I'm getting better, which of course is predicated on a deeper belief that I'm not okay, right? And so I have embraced what it is to slow down and to develop more patience, but no, I don't do slow. And my awakening process has been like a breakneck kind of, racetrack kind of a course. The pivotal moment though, if there was one, I would say there were two cataclysmic experiences that, this concept of cognitive dissonance, right? Where you're presented with something that just doesn't fit into your held worldview. And you can either deny and repress the significance of what it is that you've seen, or you can, allow to crumble your previous understanding and begin to build from scratch a new one, right? So the first kind of data point around that was when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis back in, 2009. Postpartum, my first pregnancy, and I had this dissonance surface, as a prescriber. Again, like I mentioned, to pregnant and breastfeeding women, it was quite uncomfortable for me to recognize that I myself didn't want to take a pharmaceutical for the rest of my life for a chronic illness.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really explain that, considering I had only ever consciously experienced the value of that kind of intervention and the merit of it and the legitimacy of it. And so that was when I went off into the wild unknown and began to explore non-allopathic forms of medicine and explore all of the limitations and untold adverse effects of the medicine itself that I had, prized.
Where did you start? When you had that little inkling, like where did you start digging? Did you go to seminars? Did you just start researching?
Yeah. So I became like so many of us and I would say particularly women, when we get ignited around something, it's like, the drive is so powerful. It's so immense and, could be looked at as obsessive, certainly. But I probably spent 3 years as an autodidact, teaching myself everything that I could know about the Krebs cycle and, mitochondria and the gut and all these things, but it really was experiential. And I think the most important learning is because through working with a naturopath, which I chose to do because I knew what conventional medicine had to offer, I changed my diet. And I'm Italian American. I'm also Irish, but our culture growing up was Italian, and bread and cheese was pretty much all I ate all day long, every day. And I've, for better or for worse, been naturally, on the thin side my whole life, and so I never really was motivated by weight gain, and that's why I ate McDonald's and White Castle and Popeyes. Literally, this was like I ate fast food all throughout my medical training, that can't
even Popeyes.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
sorry. Right. I want to see a picture of you eating Popeyes like that.
My kids still laugh about it because and Dunkin' Donuts, just all of it, because also as a child of the 80s, I was born in the 70s.
Yeah.
And so it was we just didn't know.
We grew up with that stuff. Velveeta was a food.
Cookie Crunch.
Yeah.
Or cereal. And, my mom is an incredible cook. And something was just being corroded in her own relationship to her Italian lineage, So anyway, so changing my diet, just taking gluten and dairy out of my diet at this woman's suggestion, revolutionized my experience of my body,
Yeah.
of constipation, of irritability, of brain fog. And I mean, it was just like within a month, like God rays came down from the heavens. And I knew that something very powerful had been obscured in my training because I had never been told, first of all, that you could put an autoimmune disease into remission, which I did in the space of a year. And I certainly was never told that nutrition has anything to do with anything unless you have diabetes.
Wow.
And in that case, just don't order like the big gulp from 7-Eleven, or whatever.
Right.
And so it was really with diet that I started to make contact with the power that I've always had to experience changes in my body through my daily lifestyle choices. And that's, of course, the foundation of now what I advocate for women. And is just the incredibly transformational power of very basic self-care choices and discipline. I'm big on discipline because I am a believer, that it's from those firm lines, and they're not meant to be dogmatic or self-punishing, but they're meant to be the origins of self-love before you feel self-love. I think can come through those firm lines so that you can access that fluidity, within the boundaries that you create for yourself. And so, the other cataclysmic point in my process was when I fell in love, with my current husband, Sayer, when I was, married, happily married, actually, and living, my postcard life, my booming practice and my beautiful kids and my doting parents and my lovely, wonderful husband. And, there was a cosmic 2x4 awaiting me to invite me deeper into what we now lovingly refer to as the spiral path of the awakening process, the inner journey. Because up until that point in my activism and advocacies, it was really about what's going on the outside, fighting big pharma and generating awareness around all of the lies that we have been told through our conventional schooling, et cetera, and specifically about the body. But the inner work is how, as an activist, you keep from becoming the monster that you're fighting, which is, of course, what we see on a grand scale right now with so much of the activism that is just fueling exactly the reality that it purports to want to dissolve and resolve. And so that is an ongoing process for me of constantly coming into contact with aspects of myself that I would rather keep locked in the basement and understanding that I'm not who I believed myself to be even last month. And so that process has been greatly facilitated by the nature of my relationship to Sayer and all of the very special challenges that come with, a certain kind of love connection.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many places we can go with this conversation. But I personally want to share how I kind of became aware of you and came into your world is I think it was last year, someone forwarded me a piece you had written. I think it may have been in partnership with someone else, but it was on questioning everything that was suddenly happening around us. And I got teary when I saw that because I said, here's someone who's articulating what I'm feeling. And as women especially, right, we're balancing the external with the evidence, right, the data and the numbers and what we're being told in the media with an inner knowing. I know for me, that inner knowing first really became strong when I had my twins 8 years ago. Like suddenly I knew, I'm like, no, you're not doing this to them. You're not doing that. Okay, that's okay. No, I don't want that test. Like it was instant. Like nothing. I mean, I used to get answers. I had to journal, and do you know what I mean? Like everything's speeding up right now. Now it's even quicker. It's amazing. I mean, that part of everything going on right now, I get teary with joy about like how connected I feel in all this. But last year was like us learning to really honor that. And that was the first piece I saw that was wasn't just a meme. It wasn't someone just ranting. It was an articulately written, well thought out. I don't know what you'd say that. What would you call it? An essay?
Yeah, that's a good one.
What we really should be paying attention to. And I was like, who is this woman? I'm obsessed with her. Started following you everywhere. And then I found the interview you did with Joe Rogan a few years ago, which is a gem. What a gem. And before, I think he was still really good then. He's good now, but he was still untainted then, by Spotify and
yeah, something changed. After the interview, something changed.
that conversation was so good. By the way, if you haven't heard that, they can hear it on your blog, right?
Yeah,
Perfect.
we're hosting it now, so it's over at Kelly Brogan MD.
And just how deep you go, and I was so refreshed to hear you talking about this inner knowing and honoring that. There's so many levels to this, right? As women, as citizens, as moms. Can you talk a bit more about? I mean, because that's what you're about, right?
Yeah, well, I want to make one comment because I love what you're sharing about the contact that you were able to make with that clear channel to your intuition when you became a mother. And right, so it's no wonder that the positioning of the government and associated industrial authorities in between mothers and their children is the most essential point of leverage for the current agenda, right? Because if we can convince, we meaning, the powers that be, if we can convince mothers that they actually don't know what's best and they must defer to authorities that know how to keep their children safe better than they could or would be able to on their own.
Yeah.
We're done, right? We're done. And that channel of intuitive capacity, it really starts with birth and starts antenatally, probably even starts preconception. And so that's why the medicalization of birth is such an important aspect of the agenda. And that's why I got, I had aerial shots of my home with death threats in 2016.
Oh my God.
When I wrote an article on home birth, of all the topics, that I talk about, it's like that one was the most incendiary, and in large part through, so-called feminist groups that are, of course, controlled through the pharmaceutical industry and paid bots and whatever else. But that was really revealing to me because I saw, okay, I've touched the nerve. This is the most essential. It's like the nexus of the control grid is to interfere with that intuitive bond and to capture the fear that women natively have because we're not held in sisterhood. We're not held in an ancestral heritage any longer. We're not held through a web of wisdom that can guide us to recognizing what we already know. Because of that, we are susceptible to the capture of our fear and specifically, right? Like what do women say when they offer their children's bodies up to, the cult of allopathy? They say, well, what if I didn't get that vaccine? What if I did that home birth and it didn't go right?
That's how they scare you. Yeah.
What if I opt out of antibiotics? Then I will be shamed for being an inadequate, horrible mother, which deep down I believe I am anyway. It's this sad, very real reflection of how divorced we are from our own capacity as embodied, carriers of that divine feminine energy, power, and wisdom. So it's been something I have, deeply explored and that I feel very strongly is important for us to keep a focus on, that we are the only ones who actually know what is best for our children. And I would say even to the exclusion of the father figures, that we are the keepers, we are the protectors when it comes to our children's bodies. And, I have taught my girls, in this window that, so my children don't wear a mask and haven't. And there was, a little bit of pushback, from the other adults in their life, just out of logistical convenience. And also because I'm considered a zealot and an extremist, and my rigidity is not always appreciated. But in this one domain, I refused any compromise. And the reason is because I want my girls to know that, especially my one daughter who is an empath, that there is never a situation where they should do anything with their body that is uncomfortable for them, for someone else's comfort. That actually won't be contributing to harmony in the universe. that actually won't be the gift to them that it seems like it would be. And there are many other ways to caretake another one's need for safety and to invest in considerate compassion. But to compromise their own physical and embodied comfort is not one of those ways, without exception. right? And so that to me is really important for my matrilineal trauma line to end that cycle of, my body is an accessory to your comfort and your sense of, need meeting and security and safety and whatever else. But I do feel like, to answer your question, that it's like kind of this spiritual glitter unicorn gumdrop kind of like pipe dream to think that we just know what our intuition is and we're going to stand by it. And so that's why I've been a big believer in a sort of progression that has worked for me and worked for the women, that I've had the privilege of facilitating, a healing process with, which is to start with what I call the Zen phrase, chopping wood and carrying water, to start with the basics of disciplined self-care and ritualized lifestyle choices that honor your nervous system and the messages that an inflammatory response are intended to deliver to you about how it is that you're living out of alignment, right? So
what's an example?
Yeah. So the protocol that I ultimately used to put my Hashimoto's into remission and that I've now operationalized on an international scale and including in a randomized placebo-controlled trial is very basic, right? So it involves nutrition, it involves detox, it involves 3 minutes a day of a contemplative practice. And it is intended to afford you the uncomfortable focus on yourself that you would otherwise excuse as too much, or you would otherwise sort of like logistically or financially or whatever other reasons you have for focusing on all of the external manifestations of your worth to the neglect of this internal caretaking, right? So you're kind of like working with yourself as if you were your own newborn baby, but just for a month, right? So it's just a month, but it's like, ends up being about like 2 hours of your day or so that you're focusing on all of these different self-care practices, including, rehabbing your nutrition. And what happens is that you begin, well, first of all, there's a field, I think, that has generated over years of what is now possible through this ritualized protocol, but you make contact with your own empowerment, right? Because the lie that subtends so much of the suffering, if not all of the suffering that we experience, is that we are powerless, right? So if you look around the hot spots of your life that you complain about and that you feel you can't do anything about, and you just have to endure, there is a certain participation that you have subconsciously opted into. There's a reason that you are experiencing the victimhood you do in that particular dynamic. And it's because it feels familiar and it feels, secure in the way that you learned from your childhood, right? And so to step out of that and into the creation of your life as you actually would like to see it, it requires such an existential terror be traversed, right? Like you have to move through your child self telling you, you will die if you don't stick with what you know, right? Because that's literally what it feels like. Like our identity is going to dissolve into a billion particles and we will die. So this process, I think, is so deeply facilitated by a sound physiologic ground and balance, where actually your nervous system is strengthened to the extent that you can actually begin to watch yourself feel feelings instead of getting caught up in the swirl of how intolerable it is for you to feel something that you don't want to feel. And not to mention that if you're bloated and your hair's falling out and your joints are aching, like who is going to be focusing on like deep spiritual lineage healing? That makes no sense. Like that's not the order of operations. We have to start with, acknowledging that the symptoms that you're feeling in your body are messages to turn towards that body. And we don't know specifically how you necessarily need to turn towards it, but you will know, and you will begin to make contact with that intuition after, the slate is cleared. And importantly, as I know you'll agree, intuition doesn't feel charged, right? That's our defenses, right? Those are our programs. Those are our wounds. Intuition is like this very quiet, stable voice inside us that it's like we kind of want to often ignore. Sometimes we really feel it and we're like, oh, but what if I do, that? Like there's all sorts of machinations around it, but it is unperturbed and it's down there. It's down there and you can make contact with it. And when you do, it's like, okay, this is the direction I put my next footstep in. And then the next footstep will be that direction.
You're right. It is a calm. I don't think I've identified that before. There is a calmness to it. It's not a lightning bolt. It's a
knowing, right? Yeah.
It exists there. In fact, I think of this because when I met it was my husband today, when I originally met Brett, I remember it wasn't like people are like, oh, were you like flash banged, like just, lightning bolt. And I'm like, you know what? It was this calm knowing. I looked at him and walked in the room and I just knew this was it. And it was different. And that's the feeling that, there's a calmness to it. It's like, you're going to be okay. It's probably cyclical because when you have that feeling about anything, you're going to be okay because you're knowing that you could feel those feelings and follow them. So there's a confidence in even knowing that you can access that. Suddenly it takes out the guesswork. You can't really make a wrong move when you honor that.
You actually can't make a wrong move ever, period, I think is the truth, because the motivation that we have to express anything that we express or decide anything that we decide is ultimately because we want to feel good and we want to feel safe, right? And we have needs that we don't otherwise know how to meet. And so the hope is that as we get to know ourselves better and as we look into those locked closets and under those beds in our subconscious, and we begin to see that, I may present to the world as a pretty tough cookie, right? But the polarity to that is also in me, right? So who is that very vulnerable, like sweet, innocent, sometimes scared woman, right? Who was a girl, right? Who is she? I don't know her, right? And it might be that she actually holds so much creative potential for me in my life. And she actually holds so much capacity for, romance and eroticism and romantic love in my life. And I won't have access to that until and if I understand that I am both this external persona and I am also her. But in owning her, I don't get to be this singular representation of myself. And the truth is, there are a lot of ways that my external persona causes me suffering and actually causes suffering to those around me. So you could say, oh, look at all those mistakes I've made. Like, I can't believe I used to prescribe, psychotropics to pregnant women. Who does that? What an animal, right? Or whatever. But the truth is that made sense to me then. Like there's this phrase, right? Like doing the best you can, right? And I've never liked that because I think there's some implicit, pathetic kind of like, it's lie in there. When we say I'm doing the best we can, it's defensive and it's not actually true because we wouldn't be able to comparatively evaluate different options that we have to say that we're doing the best one if we didn't know that there's maybe a better one that that's not available to us. It's just something in it I've never liked. And so I kind of came upon this phrase like, no, I'm doing what makes sense to me. And my mom did what made sense to her when I was a kid, and so did my dad. And so does somebody who murders somebody else. And so does, somebody who steals. And so to me, that's like at the risk of moral relativism and suggesting that there isn't such a thing as right and wrong. I think it's really helpful to kind of take the piss out of like mistakes, right? Or even doing things that we look back on and we just feel like, oh, like that kind of like nauseous wave of like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. How am I going to own that? It's going to cost me to own that. And that really comes up a lot in relationships, right? Like if we take responsibility, for what it is that we did or said or, acted on, then maybe that's going to be held against us. Or maybe that's going to mean that we're not actually a good person. We don't actually get to be right. And then we have to feel all the shame of this deep belief that we have that something is wrong with us. And all of that meaning making interferes with something that could be a much simpler process of just like, putting one foot in front of the other in this self-discovery journey.
Before I forget, can you tell everyone, you're talking about, the process you take your patients through and everything you believe in. Tell us about your books. Tell us about everywhere we can learn more about you and dive into this.
Yeah. So, when I resolve my Hashimoto's, I was actually like really pissed and felt like righteous rage instead of feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Like I don't have to take Synthroid for the rest of my life. This is awesome. And just kind of that miraculous, mysterious like wonderment that comes with something that you never knew was possible now manifesting in your lifescape. I felt that, and I felt much more strongly anger, that I had been indoctrinated really into a system that didn't tell me this was possible, and quite the contrary, right? So I had my sword aloft for many years, and that's why and how, I wrote my first book from that energy that has an exploding pharmaceutical pill on the cover. But it's also why I decided to scale my protocol, right? And make it available without a doctor. And that's when I started to see that the relationship between an MD and a patient, even when that MD is me, as somebody who is very holistically aligned and has a pharmaceutical-free practice, it's still borrowing from the conditioning of 300 years of hierarchical consciousness around embodiment, right? That I know something that my patient can't possibly know about themselves. And that's why we use tests. And that's why, I'm the one who imparts the prescription and all of this. And I started to see the real limitations of that because in my online program, Vital Mind Reset, we started to get outcomes that were more rapid and more, frankly, miraculous than were coming from my practice, where, women were spending almost an order of magnitude more on the care they were getting from me one-on-one. And so, that was kind of the intention, and also to translate into a group field what otherwise would be in the one-on-one model. And so it was really after I saw that this protocol has the capacity to ignite a very individualized process of self-reclamation and healing. And I started to see, all these outcomes that have nothing to do with psychiatry, so to speak, like with lupus or Graves' disease or chronic migraines or acne or IBS or whatever, coming from this protocol that I as a psychiatrist, I created to help people come off of psych meds, that I began to see, okay, there's a heroine's journey that's unfolding from this doorway that I've put maybe opportunistically in their path. And I, at that stage in my life, was also beginning to go, as I mentioned, through this kind of spiritual process of really looking at what I hadn't ever wanted to look at, in my childhood and in my personality aspects and in my deeper subconscious and in my emotional non-intimacy with myself. And it was the nature of that journey and the resources that support that journey that fueled my second book, Own Yourself. And it's so funny, right? Because of course, in the current climate, I never knew how relevant it would be to really understand the boundaries of your no when it comes to your body. And to also understand that you are responsible for what your yes looks like, right? Because we can fight industry and, forced injections and all these things all day long. But what do we actually stand for, right? What do we actually believe? What feels expansive and empowering and beautiful to hold in our hearts about our own bodies and about the human body in general? And that's been a lot of my focus over the past several years. And Sayer and I put on the Thank You Body Rally, which was in 86 different locations on 6 continents last year. Gosh, it feels like 10 lifetimes ago, as a kind of alternative protest, right? So a way to say, and we have all the footage on thankyoubodyrally.com. It's so beautiful, like as a way to say, like, this is what we are fighting for, actually. And it doesn't need to be referenced relative to the dominant beliefs and narratives. And it doesn't need to be a fight. It's a celebration. And that's actually a lot of, what I've focused on in the current time, including as I've been, I was deplatformed off of Facebook. I have about 3 people can see my Instagram account. And so obviously we're in transition, out of the old systems. I got off my smartphone in December, out of the old systems, and really in this kind of like uncomfortable, but also, whatever is what it is, dissolution period as we create the new, the more coherent and aligned version of our reality scape.
Yeah. I can't wait to ask you about the smartphone. This could be a whole other show, but it won't be. But really quickly, how are you doing without the smartphone? Like, was it hard? Was it easy?
Yeah.
That's my dream. My dream is to just be offline and still be able to have a functional, normal life a lot.
So it's important that I don't travel. I used to travel once a week for, 8 years or something, mostly for work and, public speaking, but then also for my relationship, which was long distance for 5 years. So right now I haven't traveled since March of 2019. So that's a really important aspect because I'm home a lot, right? And so I prepared for 3 months before coming off my iPhone because I knew that it would kick up a lot of emotional stuff, right? Because I'm a productivity junkie and I have, a kind of relationship to responsivity and availability to friends and colleagues that comes from a place of feeling like if I can't offer them this value, they probably won't love me. It's that kind of programming, and that all of that would come up, the sense of falling behind or being apart or alien, which is something I already feel deep down, so it's like it gave me this opportunity to explore all these things I actually already felt. And I created an ebook that actually, we make available to our members in Vital Life Project, but of a guide, but it really was not difficult. I have to say, I kept waiting for like this panic or the terror or whatever.
Yeah.
And I got onto something called a light phone, which is kind of like a hipstery flip phone. There's a couple of different ones coming out. Mudita is another one coming out soon. You can just get a pay whatever, like track phone. You can get so many different flip phones. There's options available. However, these kind of newfangled ones are probably going to be around for a little more as they phase out intentionally the old school flip phones, but nonetheless. And that means that when I am out and about, when I am, with friends, when I am with my kids, I'm not checking my freaking email. I'm not looking at my Telegram messages or posting to Telegram or whatever. I'm not trying to get ahead. And honestly, it's been a total relief. A big one for me is that I, for 20 years, check my phone first thing in the morning, every day. And that never felt good. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? And checking your computer first thing in the morning feels weird, right? For me, it does. So for me, that was effortless. And I thought that was going to be like hugely challenging because I could not not do it with my iPhone. I literally was not capable of accessing my freedom from that device. And so I think like so many addictions, when you set the proper boundaries for yourself, it actually feels freeing. And that's what it's been like. And there's some kinks that I haven't worked out. I still own my iPhone that I still use for marketing, making videos and stuff like that. But it doesn't have a phone number attached to it and it's not functional in that way. And so then it's more like a device, like a digital asset that I can employ as needed. And it's just, been stripped of these other addictive layers that really, really just weren't working for me.
A big step for me once I saw, that was very inspiring. And I'm like, wow, that's like serious tech goals, right? And the first thing I did though was take, at least, and I tell my clients this too, I'm like, take the apps off your phone. Like I put Instagram back on my phone, for example, once a week when I want to do a live or something and I need to have it on there. Otherwise my team manages it, or I check it on the laptop and there's something, I know you can't do everything on there, but there's something different energetically when I look at it on the computer screen versus I'm holding it in my hand. It astounded me. Like when I'm holding it in my hand, I feel like there is a cord like running to my soul or something. I get emotionally pulled into things I see or posts, or I get sucked in. And when I see it on the screen, I'm just like, okay, great. Some comments here will respond to this. Oh, I should do a comment on that. And let's post her live on Thursday. Great. And I shut it and I walk away.
Yeah.
It's so different. Kelly, to wrap up, can you share with everyone listening 3 great pieces of advice that you would like them to know based on the world we live in right now?
Yeah. So in line with, what we've been talking about, we have these challenges that we do together so Vital Mind Reset is like the deep dive program, I've talked about, but obviously that's not for everyone. And so we have this kind of like baby steps version that's like a week lifestyle challenge once a month together that we do in Vital Life Project, which is the membership that I have with Sayer.
Mm-hmm.
And
what's the web address? Because we'll share it.
Oh yeah. So it's just over on kellybroganmd.com. It's under programs, but it's just our membership, like where we hang out, talk about, everything, because now I have almost no public content any longer because it's just not worth my time because it's all censored and manipulated and then it feeds the mainstream media like material that then comes to like condemn my work. I mean, it's just not worth it. So we're behind a walled garden at this point.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there are 3 challenges that I love and I would say are worth considering for 1 week of your life. One is grounding. Right. So literally putting your feet on the ground, on the soil or the sand for 15 minutes a day. And I'm a New Yorker. I'm from New York. And so I get how monumentally challenging a task that is for some of us. And that's important information, right? Like if it is logistically nearly impossible for you to put your feet on the ground for 15 minutes a day, you are on a lifestyle level depriving yourself of a contact with a sort of recalibration energetically and physiologically that would facilitate so much of the energy that you want, to feel in your body every day, pretty much effortlessly. Okay. So that's one. Another is like a total favorite of mine since, 2015, I've been a 9 p.m. bedtime girl and I have 2 kids and they know this.
Does this fit in with your new erotic plan?
It's part of my no, this is an old one and it's probably interfering with my new erotic plan. Exactly.
You might need more time for the erotic stuff at night.
Right, exactly. And, but what I found was as somebody who used to like burn the midnight oil and work until like 2 a.m., of course, because that's the time after my kids go to sleep. And that's like when I have, time and privacy and whatever else is what I found when I shifted my rhythm and I got up early is that my productivity soared through the roof. And that was an unintended consequence of really what was, an intention to reclaim some sleep since I had started early morning meditation practice. And I was like, wait, I can't go to bed at 2 and wake up at 5:30. That's not going to fly. So I am a huge believer in the life-changing, potential of just 1 week of your life, go to bed at 9 p.m. for 1 week and see what happens.
It is life-changing. I will agree.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so those are 2. And then the last one is to think about if you're somebody who feels a little confusion around diet and nutrition or has any particular like health challenges going on, think about changing your breakfast. Because while I am a big believer in a disciplined month-long dietary regimen, I also know that it can start with understanding that what you, offer your body first thing, in the morning can change your experience of your body thereafter for the entire day. And so I have some, maybe like my greatest contribution to humanity is like this smoothie recipe that I came up with years ago when I got sick of eating eggs for breakfast. And it is very high in natural fat and you can find it in a lot of places online. And it's just called the KB. I don't know who my team would ever call it.
Great. We'll put a link to it. Yeah.
KB smoothie. Yeah. And so you can try that and it tastes like chocolate milk and see how you feel, see what your hunger level is, see what your mood and irritability level is, what is your fatigue, how is your brain feeling. And once you start to see that just having a different kind of breakfast can change the way you feel in your body, you can't unknow that. And it can start with such a simple intervention, especially if you just do it for, a committed couple of days.
Yeah. I love that. I know everyone listening can't wait to follow more of your stuff. I know you have a book out as well.
Just the 2 that are out. And then I have a children's book called A Time for Rain that I wrote with my daughter. And right now I'm mostly focused on, offering, support in the ways that I already have through the materials, but really on the community building aspects of our work. So I don't know when the next book is coming, if ever.
Maybe I'm committing you. Yeah, I don't mean to.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'd love to see is a memoir from you.
Oh my gosh.
On these decisions you've made are heavy and everything. I think you're going to look back and be like, wow, I need to share how I had the strength and courage to stand for something. So thank you for who you are and for being who I thought you would be, talking with you. This was fantastic. And I hope to meet you in person sometime. I love Miami. I'd love to meet in person.
Awesome. I mean, it's such a beautiful destination. So that would be incredible.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Glambition Radio. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe so you automatically get my new shows every week. Also, I'd love if you left us a review so more women like you can discover us. We're on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, and other major platforms. And I'd love to hear from you personally. Come join the conversation on social. Instagram is my happy place lately, and that's Allie Brown Official, but you can find links to my other platforms at alliebrown.com. Glambition Radio is the elevated conversation for women leaders, and I'm honored you tuned in.